In today's Neville Goddard conversation, we are going to discuss returning to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Neville Goddard describes the feeling of the wish fulfilled as the sensation of knowing that it is done. It is something that we experience when we identify with our vision in our imagination, via the self-talk or visualization, or some kind of sensory interpretation in imagination. So this idea of the feeling of the wish fulfilled is something that we want to reflect upon because we recognize that we are in the feeling of the wish fulfilled when we begin to and we continue to encourage certain kinds of thinking, emotional integration, as well as experiences on the day-to-day journey from a place of understanding, flow. And as a result of maintaining this kind of state of mind, we begin to release certain kinds of negative, fear-based, doubt-based, indecision-based interpretations in regards to ourself and in regards to our vision. In the last video, we brought up a couple important books that have been very helpful on my journey. Number one being Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. Number two, The 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox. And one of the important components in Outwitting the Devil is this idea of drifting. On the journey to bringing forth our vision, what we want to do is understand that the five sensory experience is rearranging to reflect our vision. There are times that it might not appear to be this way. We are looking at it from our past interpretations. In other words, we are identifying with different states of mind, which may be related to, but however, if we feel a lot of reactivity, we could say that it's different states of mind that are not in harmony with the vision. So then what we could do is return back to the state of mind. So this entire process, which Neville Goddard calls the bridge of incidents, leading to the vision, is also articulated a certain way in the 7-Day Mental Diet by Emmett Fox, in which he says, "In closing, I want to tell you that people often find that the starting of this diet seems to stir up all sorts of difficulties. It seems as though everything begins to go wrong at once. This may be disconcerting, but it is really a good sign. It means that things are moving. And is it not that the very object we have in view? Suppose your whole world seems to rock on its foundations. Hold it steadily, let it rock. And when the rocking is over, the picture will have resembled itself into something much nearer to your heart's desires." So the feeling of the wish fulfilled is a process of reconciliation within. Because on the journey, we think and we experience the five sensory world through our emotional integration, our behaviors, our thinking processes, and how we interpret ourselves. And one of the things we want to realize is that the feeling of the wish fulfilled, when committed to at that point, is done. And some way, somehow, we are going to end up on the journey to realizing our vision through the process of what I refer to as Wu Wei, which is a Taoist concept. It essentially means effortless action, or knowing when to act and when not to act. It's something that happens, you could say, automatically through you as you maintain a flow, ideal state of mind, the first-class concept of self, as we've been talking. This particular state of being is one where everything feels natural to you. It's safe to then assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, because that assumption of naturalness represents the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And we return to this through our imagination or our inner dialogue. And if for some reason we find ourselves overly identified with certain thinking that bring forth interpretations of shame to ourselves, for example, we believe we're not good enough to have what we desire, such as the money goals, the business goals, and so forth, we can find these interpretations within ourselves and change them using the subconscious mind work. Now, another important element to keep into consideration is what he shares in this quote, in which he refers to the Dr. Milliken Affirmation, which is something that I bring up a lot in the videos because I find it to be a very inspiring affirmation. And he says, "As I have said repeatedly, everything depends upon our attitude towards ourselves. That which we will not affirm as true of ourselves cannot develop in our life. Dr. Milliken wrote his dream of greatness and security in the first person present tense. He did not say, I will be great, I will be secure, for that would imply that he is not great and secure right now. Instead, he made his future dream a present fact. He said, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. Now, if a person desires to have this kind of experience, then this affirmation will stimulate a feeling of the wish fulfilled. So let's say it again. I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. If this statement resonates with you, it will stimulate the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And if this statement, for whatever the reason may be, does not resonate with you, you can find a statement that would imply, or an imaginational scene that would imply this feeling of the wish fulfilled. So this is also related to our last video because one of the things that we discussed is we have the two gifts of speech and mind. In the Hermetica, it was stated that we were given the two gifts of speech and mind, which means that we are transcendent to the two gifts. We have the two gifts of speech and mind. And as a result, we can use the two gifts of speech and mind, speech, to fill up our mind with conversation or interpretation of the five sensory experience that would imply the feeling of the wish fulfilled. We know when we're doing this based on our interpretation of the events on the journey leading up to the end result, the vision. Because all through the process, we travel into different states of mind all throughout the day. And ideally, we would like to maintain this feeling of the wish fulfilled. And the way we can do so more often is to let go of certain kinds of fears, doubts, indecision, and insecurities within ourselves. Number one, by releasing from those thoughts, recognizing we are not those thoughts, we are transcendent to those thoughts, allowing the accurate thoughts to be received within, and I mentioned in the last video many ways of stimulating those accurate thoughts that are in harmony with your vision, identifying with those thoughts, and then assuming again the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If for whatever reason may be, we find certain kinds of thinking persistent, then we recognize certain beliefs that we have about ourselves, about others, about our vision. And we want to dedicate some time, perhaps at the end of the day or some time that you have carved out, to evaluate these thinking patterns, which a lot of times comes from earlier stages of our journey, usually from childhood, in which we've encouraged certain kinds of states of mind unknowingly as a result of certain beliefs that we've interpreted about ourselves, which we would call negative beliefs or disempowering or limiting and so forth. Again, we are transcendent to these beliefs, so we can release from these beliefs and identify with the true beliefs that are in harmony and in contribution with our vision. This allows us to further embody the feeling of the wish fulfilled, the state that is one with our vision. As a result of looking at these beliefs, or as a result of changing our state of mind, and the answer is it depends on the scenario. I always like to look at this from a place of deep understanding rather than a place of denial or running away. As a result of working with these processes, it's easier for us to maintain the feeling of the wish fulfilled and dwell in it, and thus accurately interpret the five sensory experience, the different aspects of the journey, the people, the environment, the circumstance, and information, to be one with the vision. Now, the truth is we fluctuate through different states of mind, and we don't want to shame ourselves in regards to fluctuating the states of mind. We can see this as the journey of what I refer to as purification of the mind, which is actually being a lot more conscious with the gifts of speech and mind, by understanding ourselves, the programming that is within ourselves, and recognizing that we are not the programming and we have the power to change it. So some of you might remember a story that I shared a few times, and it has a lot of different symbolic meaning to me. One of the things that we've been discussing is the symbolic nature of reality and how it translates over, corresponds to the symbolism that is within our subconscious mind. Just as we can symbolically interpret our dreams, we could also symbolically interpret our day-to-day experiences, understanding the deeper meaning, the inner side of things. So the story was when I was 27 years old, and I was working in corporate. There were 2 Lamborghinis that was parked next door in the parking lot of the neighboring office. And because I was very fascinated by going down the entrepreneurial journey, I assumed that they were running their own business, and I was working in corporate, so I wanted to know what it was that we're doing. One day, I saw the owner, or I thought he was the owner, of the yellow Lamborghini, and he was sitting in the parking lot across the office at the coffee shop, and I pulled up beside him because I was coming back from lunch, and I felt this certain state of mind that I was in prior to having a conversation with him, which was fueled by a lot of the information that I was consuming. I was reading a lot about internet businesses, and I was reading certain books, and Think and Grow Rich was also big at that time for me. And I saw myself identifying more so with the lavish, steady, dependable income lifestyle. And to me, the experience was symbolic because when I had the conversation with him, I noticed that we were speaking about potentialities, about ideas. And he asked me if I was interested in a job working in his company. And he was going to hire me to do some kind of tracking device configuration because he needed it for his containers, because they were in an import and export business, which probably also explains why they have access to these cars. And so they were importing and exporting. Now, the conversation went really well, and I maintained a certain state of mind. And what I noticed is that afterwards, the doubts, the fears, the indecision started to creep up in my mind. And I started to doubt the whole process, and I would try to reach out to him, but for some reason, I couldn't get a hold of him. He was hard to get a hold of. Every time I would call his office, his assistant wasn't able to pass me over to him. Even though I thought that he was quite open and welcoming, I didn't know what was going on. Now, upon working with this information, I realized that I went into a different state of mind at some point and then was experiencing reality from that state of mind. And it was expressed in my behaviors and how I was relating with others. And it was revealed based on my thinking surrounding it. Doubt-based, fear-based, insecurity-based, and so forth. Now, this was very symbolic to me because I recognized that although I was working with the information more so at the earlier stage of the journey, upon working with it at a deeper level, I would be able to maintain this ideal state of mind, and it would become my identity. It would become my self-image. I would be so one with it that if opportunities would be presented to me, I can then decide if I want to take the opportunities, and I would intuitively know if they were the right opportunities. And I wouldn't have any doubts, indecisions that would show up. I would know with vivid clarity. Now, this is something that happened along the journey. Within a year later, I left the corporate world and started my own IT business, and then it started to grow. And I always look back at that story because I recognize that certain states of mind, some that represent the feeling of the wish fulfilled, seem to have certain experiences in life that are representative of it. The people, the environment, the circumstances, the behaviors, the thinking, the experiences are one with that state of mind. And in different states of mind, it seems that there's polarizingly opposite experiences, interactions, and interpretations of the same people and even the same opportunities. So he says here, as I have said repeatedly, everything depends on our attitude towards ourselves. So while there was a part of me that felt that I was identifying more so with that ideal first-class concept of self, I recognized that I wasn't doing it to the degree that I would have liked to do. Now, I'm reflecting upon this a lot deeper as I've been working with the Neville Goddard information all throughout the journey. And I also realized that I didn't have to be perfect at maintaining a certain state of mind. Things did eventually work out, ideally, as I found the business success and success in other areas of my life as a result of identifying with certain states of mind and experiencing this feeling of the wish fulfilled, the one with those particular visions. Now, the thinking or certain kinds of programming that was within myself seemed to cause certain kinds of reactivity to certain experiences, interpretations. As I look back at those experiences, I realized that what I could have done, and actually I don't regret it because I'm very happy on the journey that I went down and how things worked out. But what I could have done is just ask myself the question in those moments when I had the fears, doubts, indecision, what I refer to as cause and effect reflection. Is this really true? Is this really so? What if I were to enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled, which is identifying with, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit? What if I enter into it? How would I experience my interaction with him? Would some way, somehow, I call him up and say, oh, I'm interested in the job? Or maybe I would say something like, well, what if we work some kind of part-time deal? Maybe I could do some kind of side deal with you, and we can both see how it works, and then if it works out, and maybe that could lead to some other opportunities. I felt that if I said those things, and I realize it now because it's more of an embodiment of the state of mind now, that he probably would have agreed to it. I don't actually believe he was looking to hire me. I recognize that he saw these entrepreneurial aspects within me because I saw it within myself. And all I had to do was just maintain that state of mind, and it would play out even more so in the business deals and so forth. Well, now it's a great story because one of the reasons why I recognize I've had these experiences of trying things and not having it work out and trying things and working out is so I could see the distinction, so I could understand and track it back to what's going on within myself. So as Neville says, as I've said repeatedly, everything depends upon our attitude towards ourselves. That which we will not affirm as true of ourselves cannot develop in our lives. Dr. Milliken wrote his dream of greatness and security in the first person present tense. He did not say, I will be great, I will be secure, for that would have implied that he was not great and secure. Instead, he made his future dream a present fact. He said, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income, consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. He also goes on to say in the same lecture, we hear much of the humble man, the meek man. But what is meant by a meek man? He is not poor and groveling, the proverbial doormat, as he generally conceived to be. Men who make themselves as worms in their own right have lost the vision of that life into the likeness of which it is the true purpose of the Spirit to transform this life. Men should take their measurements not from life as they see it, but from men like Dr. Milliken, who, while poor and unproven, dared to assume, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. Such men are the meek of the Gospels, the men who inherit the earth. And so he says, a meek man is a self-disciplined man. He is so disciplined, he sees only the finest. He thinks only the best. He is the one who fulfills the suggestion. Brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. So what he's referring to is thinking of the things that are in harmony with the vision. And as a result of thinking these things, we experience reality from those perspectives, which bring us into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That is what he's referring to as self-discipline. It's to reconcile the different interpretations, as we discussed in last Sunday's video, the divergent and the convergent thinking. Bring it more into a harmonious reconciliation and see the different things to be in contribution to your vision in some shape or form. This will allow us to maintain a certain state of mind. As mentioned, that particular story, I'm very happy that things played out the way it did on my journey. But however, I do like to refer to that story because in that particular time, all I had to do if I wanted to pursue the opportunities that were going to unravel, because as mentioned, I don't believe he was aiming to offer me a job. He came off as being very entrepreneurial, and usually entrepreneurs are interested in things like joint ventures, partnerships, commission structure, referral processes, and so forth. Partnerships. And one of the ways that they usually get started is by hiring someone. And he saw that in me because I saw it within myself. All I had to do, if I really wanted to continue down that thread of maintaining that feeling of the wish fulfilled and seeing my opportunity all the way to completion, at that point, and as mentioned, I don't regret things because it did turn out in a harmonious way, but I believe that that story was something that I experienced so that I could reflect upon it, so I could understand this information. Kind of like breadcrumbs that we leave so we could understand how things work at a deeper degree. So in order to pursue it, had I had really want to, all I would do is ask myself, is this kind of thinking in relation to the fears, doubts, indecision, insecurities, which we discussed in the last video, is this really true? And what I would realize is that it's not in harmony with the first-class concept of self that is representative of this kind of affirmation in regards to prosperity. And then I would change my thinking. I would say, what is true? I would receive the accurate thinking within myself. Try it. You'll notice that if you question the different experiences that you have on your journey and just ask yourself, is this true? My interpretation, whatever it may be, if we call it limiting or disempowering or negative, if we put those labels on it, ask ourselves, is it really true, this interpretation that we're giving to whatever experience that we're having on the journey, the five sensory experience? And if it's not true, we'll notice that we'll find a better way of looking at it, a different perspective. And that different perspective will resonate with us. And then we'll return back into the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Now, through this process of doing this, the doors would have opened up. And this is the process that we all as entrepreneurs learn on the journey to realizing our visions. Is you recognize that it's our certain thinking about the certain experiences that is causing us to not see the opportunities. And if we're okay with not moving forward with the opportunities, then that's fine. But we can see the opportunities if we'd like to see the opportunities. And if we want to move forward with the opportunities, then we can move forward with the opportunities. And one of the things that ends up happening is we realize that we do deserve the opportunities. There's no shame in it. It's either we want the opportunities or we don't want the opportunities. Now, when he's referring to the meek man, I also believe that he's referring to the ability to transcend the thoughts. So a meek man can be looked at as someone who has the ability to realize that they're not their thoughts, and then selectively identify with the thoughts that are true, which brings them into the feeling of the wish fulfilled, which they can do real time in the moment if they find themselves in different states of mind, recognize that they are transcendent to those thoughts, release from those thoughts, to bring forth the richness of imagination and strength of attention, as we discussed also in last Sunday's video when Neville said, man is only limited by poverty of imagination and weakness of attention. This is the kind of thinking that we can transcend from and identify more with the richness of imagination and strength, the lighthearted strength of attention by representing the meek man. And so when he says, it is my belief that all men can, like Dr. Milliken, change the course of their lives, I believe that Dr. Milliken's technique of making his desire a present fact to himself is of great importance to any seeker after the truth. It is also his high purpose to be of mutual benefit. That is inevitably the goal of all of us. It is much easier to imagine the good of all than to be purely selfish in our imagining. By our imagining, by our affirmations, we can change our world, we can change our future. So this segment, which I pulled from one of his lectures, I'll put a link in the description to his lecture, is something that I've returned to regularly because it really consolidates a number of things that we've been discussing. Is to identify if we go into different states of mind, to develop the awareness that we are going into different states of mind, we're transcendent to the states of mind, the ways of thinking and so forth. And from that perspective, which is more detached from the thinking, we can identify with the accurate thinking. And also, alongside, if we find ourselves overly identified with certain heavy kind of programming, shame and so forth, we can get to the root of that programming through the subconscious mind work, identify the programming, and change that programming. And it's a matter of really letting go of the programming. Because once we let go of certain ideas, like we are not good enough, we are not deserved, we automatically find certain kinds of thinking. And in a way, we can go back to the video that we discussed on Thursday. And for a lot of areas of our life, we find ourselves automatically in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And thus the thoughts are more often in harmony with the vision. So I look at this as a combination of both. Getting into the ideal state of mind, which is one with the vision, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, as well as if for whatever the reason may be, if we find excessive identification to certain programming, which changes our states of mind, which changes our experiences, we can understand this programming and make peace with it, doing the subconscious mind work. And what I like to work with is self-talk, audio affirmations, environment, and revision. And I met many people who use many different kinds of modalities to go in and understand this programming and release from heavily identification with certain programming, which a lot of times comes from earlier stages of our journey. Because as we've discussed, we are the prosperity, and we deserve the prosperity that we desire. And perhaps in earlier stages of our journey, we began to identify with certain programming that we shouldn't have the prosperity. We felt shameful to it. When we recognize that we have been given the two gifts of speech and mind, and that we fill the gifts of speech and mind with certain interpretation, then we recognize that we are not bound to those interpretations as we have the power to release it. And we also recognize that these interpretations are stored in the subconscious mind. And that's why the reference is made a lot in these kinds of materials to do the subconscious mind work, because that's where the root of the programming is. And as we change it, we bring forth our vision from the perspective of flow and further reveal our first-class concept of self. So let's go ahead and conclude this with an affirmation. You could say, I have the ability to return to the feeling of the wish fulfilled now. I earn a lavish, steady, dependable income consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. This elevates my perspective and understanding of myself and who I truly am. As I maintain embodying this feeling of the wish fulfilled, it represents itself in my thoughts, my emotions, my behaviors, and the expressions and my relatability with people, environment, circumstance, and information. In this reality, I live with a greater degree of peace, love, and harmony. Through the process, I allow the five-sensory experience to rearrange and reflect my vision from the perspective of Wu Wei. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.